So, where the communist era came in very rapidly and very violently, its end is going to be equally rapid, but it's going to be very peaceful for the most part between the late 1970s and 1991. In China, the big turning point here is going to be Mao Zedong goes and dies in 1976. You want to put down here next to number one. Do you want to put, please, here that the CCP gradually abandoned Maoist socialism. The CCP gradually abandoned Maoist socialism. They sort of kind of chill out a little bit. It's kind of similar to what happened in the Soviet Union after the death of Stalin. There was a little bit of a reckoning there and a little bit of, chilling out of relationships. And we kind of see something kind of similar going on in China as well. In Europe, we're going to have popular movements that are going to overthrow the communist governments in 1989. And this is really going to be the beginning of the end for communism within Eastern Europe and also within the Soviet Union itself. But that's kind of coming. In both cases, and you want to put a little star here next to number three. In both cases, it's going to show the economic failure of communism because both communist states couldn't catch up economically. Um, the Soviet economy was stagnant. And on top of this, like I said before, and you want to put this down here next to B, do you want to put down that for the USSR, the arms race, the space race, and foreign issues, and put foreign issues in quotes, and foreign issues helped to bring them down, helped to bring them down. So it wasn't just the fact that their economy was rocky, but you also add all of these other expenses, like trying to keep up the nuclear and the military arms race with the United States, trying to do the space race, also having these foreign issues like with Cuba, the near disaster there, also a lot of other third world countries, but also the Afghani war that goes on for more than a decade. All of this really shows the amazing economic weakness, in particular, of the Soviet Union. Both cases are going to show the moral failure of communism. And this is something that we talked about before, where we already talked about Stalin's terror and the gulags, Mao's Cultural Revolution. We also have the near genocide in Cambodia that we didn't talk about. So you're going to put down here next to C underneath number two. Do you want to put down that this is the Khmer? And this last two words are going to be both capitalized. Khmer is Khmer, Khmer, and then capital Rouge. And again, that's something that we'll deal with a little bit later, but you can't have a near genocide and again claim that the ideology you're supporting is, better than all ideologies. And all of this, of course, is happening in a global climate that is embracing democracy and human rights. In the aftermath of World War II, you're really starting to have a hard time defending these type of totalitarian dictatorships. I mean, after all, World War II was fought against these types of totalitarian dictatorships. With China, again, situation is going to be a little different. They're going to be abandoning communism, sort of, kind of, but they're also going to be maintaining the Communist Party. After the death of Mao in 1976, Deng Xiaoping is going to come to power. And again, he kind of just like Brezhnev does after the death of Stalin, he kind of chills things out a little bit. He relaxes censorship. He dismantles collectivized farming. He's going to free some political prisoners. And China also, importantly, most importantly, is going to open itself up to the world economy. And the result for this is going to be stunning economic growth and new prosperity. But politically, the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP, is going to keep its political monopoly, brutally crushing down a democracy movement in the 1980s. In fact, there is a huge issue that is going on currently between the Chinese Communist government and the Hong Kong population who want to retain some of the rights and privileges and distinctions that they had that were ingrained in them during their imperial period under the control of the English. The Chinese are coming in and are really cracking down on any type of political dissent that's going on there. Um, and of course, the most brutal episode of this crushing of democratic movements in the 1980s, of course, is going to be the Tiananmen Square massacre. China now is this really, it's a critter. It's this strange, troubled hybrid that combines nationalism, consumerism, and a new respect for ancient traditions. One of the things that's going on within China is almost this resurrection of these very traditional Chinese ideas, like Confucianism and Taoism and Buddhism are really kind of coming back. These very iconic Chinese traditions that Mao and the communists saw as antiquated and something that keeps the Chinese people and the Chinese nation down. You now have these Chinese trying to reclaim those ancient traditions, in a lot of ways, kind of trying to reclaim their identity. With the Soviet Union, there tends to be a gradual breaking away and disillusion of the communist regime. And it really starts when Mikhail Gorbachev becomes Secretary General in the mid 1980s. Here, he launches an economic reform program known as Perestroika in 1987. And he also goes and does something known as Glasnost for greater cultural and intellectual freedoms. Well, what he wants to do with perestroika, and you want to put this down here next to A underneath number one, you want to put down that he wanted to help the economy. He wanted to help the economy. With both of these reforms, so it's perestroika that was intended to kind of try to fix what unfortunately was hopelessly broken, and then glasnost, which was meant to allow for some greater freedoms. It really kind of shows exactly how broken and to what degree a disaster the Soviet Union really is. And in fact, this glasnost, this freedom, really revealed the mess that the Soviet Union had. um, it also shows you the extent of Stalin's atrocities. It opens new religious expression. There's the ending of government censorship of culture. So, what Gorbachev intends to use as a means by which to continue and to fix some of the problems that are within the communist system are actually going to be one of the things that kind of, brings about its removal. The move to end the Cold War by making unilateral military cuts, negotiating arm controls with the United States. Um, what Gorbachev is trying to do here, and you want to put this down here next to number four. Do you want to put, please, here that Gorbachev wanted to concentrate on domestic issues? Gorbachev wanted to concentrate on domestic issues. A lot of what Gorbachev is trying to do is to save the communist heartland. When the revolutions begin to in Eastern Europe to end communism in Eastern Bloc countries, he just sort of kind of lets them go. Where in the 1950s and the 1960s, you have the Soviet government literally throwing tanks at the rebellions that are going on in Hungary in the 50s and in Czechoslovakia in 1968. Gorbachev is like, well, just let them go. Let's go and let's sign an arms treaty with the United States so he can start concentrating on the problems within Russia, within the Soviet Union, and not have to worry about all of that extra crap. Let's kind of fix the situation at home, and everything else we really don't need to worry about. But like I said before, Gorbachev's reforms are going to lead to the collapse of the Soviet Union. Although you need to kind of realize, you want to put this down here next to number 5, that the Soviet Union was very, and underline very a bunch of times, the Soviet Union was very weak before this. I mean, honestly, it's really on the verge of collapse, and Gorbachev just sort of kind of like, slides it into a safe place in a lot of ways, because ultimately it's going to go bye-byes by 1991. By the year 2000, the communist world had shrunk considerably. Communists had lost their dominance completely in the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe. I mean, there's no communist regimes there. China had mostly abandoned communist economic policies. I mean, it's sort of kind of communism, but economically not communism. Vietnam and Laos remained officially communist, but pursued a Chinese style reforms. So both Vietnam and Laos are kind of like these weird hybrids. Cuba is going to kind of follow suit when they have an economic crisis in the 1990s that starts them to allow small business and private food markets and tourism. Again, got to get the money someplace. The only exception to this, and you want to put a star here by number 14, the only exception is going to be North Korea, which is the most unreformed and Stalinist communist state left. That's it. Everybody else has either ended communism completely, or they are some kind of hybrid, like almost like communism light. Like there's a little bit of communism there, but there's also some, capitalism and westernization going on as well.